Hello everyone, Ravi here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes national, international and business news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of let's grow together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. 29th May 2021. National news. Gov puts off decision on tax relief for COVID-19 supplies. Group of ministers to meet, recommend rates for individual items. Special correspondent, New Delhi. The Goods and Services Tax (GST) Council failed to agree on immediate tax breaks for critical pandemic relief supplies, including COVID-19 vaccines, and constituted a group of ministers to recommend individual items tax rates by June 8. Union Finance Minister Nirmala M, chairing the Council's first meeting in nearly 8 months on Friday, said there were protracted discussions with varying viewpoints on the taxation of COVID-related items, and these dominated the over 8-hour parley between the states and the centre. So I have decided and announced a group of ministers to submit a report within 10 days so that if there are any further reductions that need to be done, will be done, Ms. Sitharaman said. States' demand. Opposition-ruled states, including West Bengal, Kerala and Punjab, have been demanding that the GST levied on COVID-related items be scrapped. The minister added that revenue implications were not driving the rate cut reluctance, rather the question of whether GST relief on such items will benefit the common man. Technical panels reviewing the rates have found that there will be a collateral impact of rate cuts on other items, she explained. I underlined the fact that it is not as if one segment said we should do it on humanitarian grounds and another said we shouldn't do anything on humanitarian grounds, the minister said. While Punjab Finance Minister Manpreet Singh Badal said that GST hush COVID-19 relief put on hold for lack of compassion by the union government, Ms. Sitharaman refused to react directly. If we are quick to say that the centre has no compassion, I have nothing to say. Ultimately, we are all responsible for our citizens' welfare. I humbly submit that the interest of all the states and the centre is towards making sure that Indians get the vaccine on time and the states get their fair share of revenues in time, Ms. Sitharaman said. Kolkata's COVID deaths in 2021 could be 4 times more. April-May excess deaths were 7 times more than official count. Srinivasan Ramani Vignesh Radhakrishnan Chennai. If data on certified deaths in Kolkata in 2021 so far are any indication, the number of excess deaths compared to previous years was as high as 4.5 times the official recorded figure of 1,371 COVID-19 related deaths, indicating a much higher toll from COVID-19. Excess deaths were estimated from data on death certification from the Kolkata Municipal Corporation accessed by The Hindu. In April and May 2021, till May 27, of the second wave alone, excess deaths were as high as 6.87 times the officially recorded figure of 1,198 deaths. During this period when the second wave raged in Kolkata, there were 8,234 excess deaths, compared to 1,198 reported COVID-19 deaths. These excess deaths were calculated as the difference between the 17,587 certified deaths in April and May 2021 and the average number of certified deaths in the same period in the pre-pandemic years between 2015 to 2019, 9,353. It is to be noted that the excess deaths could also include deaths due to other causes because of the inability or the lack of access to health services, which were diverted to cater to the pandemic. But the bulk of excess deaths in a pandemic peak should largely be COVID-19 related deaths. The lower multiple of 4.5 for January to May 2021 as opposed to April to May 2021 was because of a low number of certified deaths in March 2021, 4,384 compared to the pre-pandemic years, 2015 to 2019, average of 5,520. This could also be because of lower certification numbers, as deaths during recent months are certified with a lag, a pattern that holds true for April and May as well. Thus, 2021's deaths could increase further as more data is available. With inputs from Shiv Sahai Singh in Kolkata. Covaxin output cycle may hit center's deadline. Each batch takes 4 months, says firm. Only about 11% of India's population has got at least one dose. Nagra Gopal. Amid claims by the center that all Indians would be vaccinated by the year end, Bharat Biotech, the manufacturer of Covaxin, has disclosed that it takes 120 days, or about 4 months, for a manufactured batch of vaccines to be released for supply. Thus, production batches of Covaxin that were initiated during March this year will be ready for supply only during the month of June, the company said in a statement on Friday. 2.5 crore doses supplied. So far, between 2-2.5 crore doses of Covaxin have reportedly been supplied. Earlier this month, V.K. Paul, who heads India's National Empowered Group on vaccines, stated that 216 crore doses of vaccines would be available by December. Nearly 60%, or about 130 crore doses, and enough to inoculate every Indian once, is premised on quantum jumps in the supply of the two vaccines, Covishield and Covaxin, with 50 to 55 crore of the latter. Help children orphaned by COVID-19, orders SC identify those in distress, officials told. A volunteer handing over food packet to a child in Odisha. Biswaranjan Rout. Krishnadas Rajagopal. The Supreme Court on Friday said precious time was being lost as children orphaned, abandoned and traumatized by the COVID-19 pandemic were starving on the streets of this large country. The court ordered district authorities across the country to immediately fan out and identify these children in need of care and provide them with basic needs like food, shelter and clothes. Days are passing by without children getting any food. Hope you will understand, to the center and the states, the agony these children are undergoing on the streets. We do not know the age of these children starving on the streets or how many of them are there in such a large country, a visibly anguished Justice L. Nageshwar Rao, accompanied by Justice Aniruddha Bose on the bench, said. The hearing on Friday was based on an urgent application filed by the amicus curiae, Advocate Gaurav Agrawal, who placed on record a report in The Hindu about the plight of children during the pandemic. Mamta skips PM's review meet on Yas. She met Modi separately and submitted report on the damage caused by cyclone. Mamta Banerjee at a review meeting in South 24 Parganas on Friday. Ani. Shiv Sahai Singh, Kolkata. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamta Banerjee on Friday skipped the review meeting on Cyclone Yas presided by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Kalaikunda Air Base in the state, even though she met Mr. Modi at the same venue. The Chief Minister also handed the Prime Minister a report on the disaster caused by the cyclone. After having review meetings in Hingalganj and Sagar, I met the Honble PM in Kalaikunda and apprised him regarding the post-cyclone situation in West Bengal. The disaster report has been handed over for his perusal. I have proceeded now to review the relief and restoration work at Digha, Ms. Banerjee said on social media. The Chief Minister told media persons that she could not participate in the review meeting as she had to attend a meeting on the damage caused in Haldia. We went to Kalaikunda. Chief Secretary Alapan Bandyofiai accompanied me. We submitted a report and urged the Prime Minister that what he deems fit he should implement on the basis of the report, Ms. Banerjee told media persons later in the day. She said that the state government has sought implementation of two schemes each of 10,000 rupees crore for Digha development and Sundarbans development. This was the first meeting between Mr. Modi and Ms. Banerjee after the assembly election. Sources said Ms. Banerjee was upset about BJP leaders, particularly leader of opposition and Nandigram MLA, Suvendu Adhikari, being present at the meeting. The developments evoked a strained response from the BJP leadership. Party chief JP Nadda said Ms. Banerjee's absence is murder of constitutional ethos and the culture of cooperative federalism. Reacting to the developments, West Bengal Governor Jagdeep Dhankar said it would have served the interests of the state and its people, for CM and officials at Mamta official to attend review meet by PM. Confrontational stance ill serves interests of state or democracy. Non-participation by CM and officials not in sync with constitutionalism or rule of law, he said on Twitter. Cyclone Yas swept past the coastal areas of West Bengal and Odisha on May 26, causing widespread damage. Ms. Banerjee had estimated the damage in West Bengal to the tune of 20,000 rupees crore. Delhi to start, unlock, process from May 31. Construction activity and factories to resume in capital next week, says CM. Daily wagers outside a closed shop in Delhi's biggest marble and tiles market in Mangalpuri on Friday. Sushil Kumar Verma. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal on Friday said the Delhi government will start the unlock process in a phased manner from May 31 as the number of daily COVID-19 cases is decreasing. Construction activity and factories will start from the coming week as daily wages and laborers were the worst affected due to the lockdown, Mr. Kejriwal said in a video message. The city was placed under a 6-day lockdown on April 19. As infections and deaths continued to spike and pushed the city's health infrastructure past its limits, the lockdown was extended several times. This lockdown is till 31 May 2005 am. On Friday, a Delhi Disaster Management Authority meeting was conducted under the leadership of the Lieutenant Governor, wherein it was decided that we will slowly and steadily begin the process of opening up, he said. Over the past 24 hours, the city saw around 1,100 cases and the test positivity rate dipped to 1.5%. With great effort and difficulty, the situation has somewhat come under control, but the battle is not won yet. We should not lose all the gains of the lockdown by suddenly opening up. It is a unanimous belief among experts that the lockdown be opened up slowly, he said. A balance must be struck between controlling the pandemic and allowing as much economic activity as possible, said the Delhi CM. Weekly assessment. Recognizing the dire situation of daily wagers and migrant laborers, Mr. Kejriwal said, such workers are found mostly in construction activities and factories. So, it was decided that these activities will be opened from Monday for 1 week. The unlock process will be assessed weekly based on public feedback, he added. If the government observes that novel coronavirus cases are rising again, then the government will need to halt the unlock procedure, warned Mr. Kejriwal. NSUI holds stir outside ministry, seeks cancellation of Class 12 board exams. NSUI members during the protest outside the Education Ministry in New Delhi on Friday. Shiv Kumar Pushpaka. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. Student activists of the National Students Union of India, NSUI, organized a protest outside the Ministry of Education on Friday demanding cancellation of Class 12 board examinations that have been postponed due to the second COVID wave. As some students in PPE kits gathered outside the ministry, the NSUI on social media amplified its demand to find an alternative to physical examinations. The students raised the slogan, Pehle Suraksha, Fir Pariksha, first safety then examination. NSUI's national president Neeraj Kundan said they had written to the ministry that conducting an examination in such a situation could be life-threatening. The government has already failed to procure the vaccines and there seems no definite plan for that, and now this lack of planning for the board exams will harm the academic year of these students. The only solution to save their academic year is now to promote them by internal assessments rather than wasting more time on discussing the examinations, Mr. Kundan said. The NSUI said the government was pondering on conducting the examination in 19 main subjects and coming up with an alternate evaluation formula for other subjects. If the government is ready to come up with an evaluation formula for other subjects, then why can't they do the same for these 19 subjects as well, it said. Mr. Kundan suggested that students be graded on basis of their past performances, assignments, or classroom assessments. There might be students who are already suffering from COVID or the students who might be in trauma of having their family members infected. We don't know if all such students will be in a condition to appear for the exam at all, Mr. Kundan said. More voices against Lakshadweep changes prominent people right to Venkaiah, Kerala Governor. UDF leaders staging a stand-in to express solidarity with the people of Lakshadweep on Friday. S. Mahinsha. John L. Paul Kochi. The Lakshadweep Development Authority Regulation 2021, LDA, will destroy the delicate ecosystem of the Coral Isles, and the life and livelihood of the islanders. Three prominent people, including former administrator of Lakshadweep Wajahat Habibullah, who also served as chairman of National Commission for Minorities, have said in a letter submitted to Vice President Venkaiah Naidu and Kerala Governor Arif Muhammad Khan. The other signatories are Mohini Giri, former chairperson of National Commission for Women, and Saida Hamid, former member of Planning Commission, in charge of Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep. The unique land and its ethnic community structure withstood the vagaries of ocean and weather. The carrying capacity of 22 sq-km area of the inhabited isles would be stretched to their limit by the indiscriminate expansion of tourism and various projects proposed under the euphemistic title of planning and development, they said. In a nutshell, these projects would destroy the life of the people, the signatories said. The recent policy changes, proposed unilaterally and arbitrarily, had given no consideration to matters like land use, land ownership, ocean resource utilization, and livelihood practices of the community. The culture and traditions of people who lived there had been violated by intervention into their food ethos, beef ban, opening liquor shops, etc. They would also tear apart their traditional methods of decision-making based on democratic decentralization, the letter said. Maratha quota, BJP MP warns of protest if demands not met by June 6. Bhosale seeks district-level hostels for Maratha students and two-day assembly session on giving benefits to community. Sambhaji Raje Bhosale at a press conference in Mumbai on Friday. Emmanuel Vyogini Emmanuel Yogini. Press Trust of India Mumbai. Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, MP Sambhaji Raje Bhosale on Friday warned that if the Maharashtra government does not approve his demands concerning the Maratha community by June 6, he would launch an agitation irrespective of the raging COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking to reporters in Mumbai, Mr. Bhosale, a descendant of Maratha warrior King Chhatrapati Shivaji, said he submitted a list of his demands to Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray on Friday. Letter to CM. I submitted a list of 5 demands to CM Uddhav Thackeray today. If the state government does not approve it till June 6, I will personally start an agitation from Raigad Fort regardless of the COVID-19 restrictions, he said. Mr. Bhosale submitted the list of demands over 3 weeks after the Supreme Court struck down the law granting quota to the Maratha community in admissions and government jobs. The court termed it unconstitutional, and held that there were no exceptional circumstances to breach the 50% reservation cap set by the 1992 verdict. The Supreme Court on May 5 struck down the Maratha reservation law of the government, and I had requested people to desist from any reaction. But I will not do so this time, he said. The parliamentarian had on Thursday met Nationalist Congress Party Chief Sharad Pawar to discuss the Maratha reservation issue and urged him to take an initiative in the matter. Over the last few days, he toured parts of the state to discuss with locals from the community regarding the course of action. List of demands. Mr. Bhosale's demands include convening a 2-day session of the state legislature to take some decisions that would benefit the Maratha community, and setting up of district-level hostels for Maratha students. His other demands are empowering Sati, Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj Research, Training and Human Development Institute, with efficient and active people, giving it a funding of 1,000 rupees crore, increasing the amount of loan given by the Anna Saheb Patil Economically Backward Development Corporation to 25 rupees lakh. I have placed these demands before the Chief Minister. I will wait for the decision till June 6, he said. Mr. Bhosale's term in Rajya Sabha ends in May 2022. India seeks more studies on virus origin. World Health Assembly reviews findings of the WHO special team that visited China earlier this year. Global concerns. The World Health Assembly's annual meeting at Geneva will conclude on June 1. WHO Reuters. Who Reuters? Suhasini Haidar, New Delhi. India on Friday pushed for further studies on the origins of the novel coronavirus, as the decision-making body of the World Health Organization, WHO, the World Health Assembly, reviewed the findings of its special team. The 120-page report submitted by the WHO on March 31 had listed various hypotheses as possible origins, including the lab leak theory that it said was extremely unlikely, but concluded that there was need for further research. Several countries at the Assembly's ongoing annual meeting from May 24 to June 1 have raised the need for further studies, but it is unclear whether the body will pass any resolution on the issue. The WHO-convened global study on the origins of COVID-19 is an important first step. It stressed the need for the next phase of studies, as also for further data and studies, to reach robust conclusions, said Ministry of External Affairs, MIA, official spokesperson Arindam Bagachi. The follow-up of the WHO report and further studies deserved the understanding and cooperation of all, he stated, in reference to WHO Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus' earlier statement that accused China of limiting access to its team to conduct studies. On April 1, the MIA issued a statement on the report, which had listed 4 pathways, or possible options that led to the pandemic: a direct zoonotic transmission, the introduction of the virus through another intermediate host or animal, the introduction through the cold chain or food chain, and a laboratory incident. The inquiry conducted over 4 weeks by a joint WHO-China study team had concluded that the first 2 theories were likely to very likely, the food chain theory, possible, and the lab incident theory, extremely unlikely. In its statement, India also called for a comprehensive and expert-led mechanism to investigate the origin of COVID-19 in cooperation with all stakeholders, and supported the possibility of an additional WHO mission to the Chinese sites to further study the issue. India's statement comes days after US Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra called on the WHO to conduct a second and more transparent investigation into the origins of COVID-19. US President Joseph Biden has also tasked his national security advisor and intelligence agencies to redouble efforts to reach a conclusion on the origins of the virus. China, which has consistently denied the theory that there was a leak from the Wuhan lab, where research on zoonotic transmissions of coronaviruses was taking place, criticized Mr. Biden's statement. Spokesperson of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs Zhao Lijian accused the US of not caring about facts and truth, or serious scientific origin tracing, on Thursday, indicating that China considers the lab leak theory report closed. Interview vertical bar Narendra Kumar Arora, children with comorbidities are at higher risk for disease follow-up with doctors is key, says task force member Bindu Shajan Perapadan. Children with comorbidities or on immunosuppressants are at a higher risk of developing COVID-19 complications, said Dr. Narendra Kumar Arora, pediatric gastroenterologist and a senior member of the National COVID-19 Task Force. He warned that there are cases of long COVID in children as well, in which a patient can develop a new disease such as diabetes or hypertension even after 3 to 6 months of recovery. Recently, many states have reported an increase in the number of children testing positive for COVID. Do you think more children are being infected in the second wave? Children are as susceptible to COVID infection as adults, and according to our latest national Sero survey, 25% of children surveyed were found to be affected. Even children below 10 years were found to be as infected as other age groups. National data on the disease tells us that around 3 to 4% of children were symptomatic during the first wave of COVID-19, and this percentage remains the same during the second wave. However, since the total number of cases has gone up, it has affected more children this time. Are more children developing severe infection during the second wave? A vast majority of children either remain asymptomatic or develop a mild disease. In a household, if several adults are diagnosed with COVID infection, there is a high possibility that the children will also be infected. Fortunately, in most such cases, the children, particularly those below 10 years old, are usually asymptomatic or have mild, common cold-like symptoms, or diarrhea. However, children with congenital heart disease, diabetes, asthma, or those suffering from childhood cancers, or on immunosuppressants are at a higher risk of developing severe disease. Parents should watch COVID-sick children closely. Many of the serious complications in children occur in or after the second week of acquiring the infection. Overall, there is no evidence that children are especially susceptible, but due to a larger number of persons getting infected, the absolute number of affected children has also increased. How is the treatment for children different from that for adults? We don't recommend any medicine for asymptomatic children. In mild cases, we prescribe simple paracetamol to manage fever and other mild symptoms. Similarly, diarrhea is managed with oral rehydration fluids and plenty of fluid. In moderate to severe cases, the treatment is the same as that for adults. Parents must immediately consult a doctor if they observe respiratory distress, increased respiratory rate, severe cough that is interfering with feeding, hypoxia, uncontrolled fever, or any other unusual symptoms like skin rash or excessive sleepiness in children. Also, it is very vital to know that there are cases of long COVID-19 in children as well, in which a patient develops a new disease such as diabetes, hypertension even after 3 to 6 months of recovery. The parents should be in touch with their doctor for follow-up of children who have recovered from acute COVID illness. What precautions should the parents or caregivers take to protect themselves from catching the infection from children? Firstly, each member of the family should get tested for COVID-19. The caregiver should wear full protection gear, double masks, face shield, gloves, while caring for the child. Care should be provided under the guidance and supervision of a doctor. The caregiver and the child should isolate themselves from the rest of the family. We have also seen cases of new mothers contracting the disease. In such cases, how should she protect her child from getting the infection? In such cases, any person who is not COVID positive should care for the child. However, a lactating mother should extract her milk and feed the child. If there is no one else to take care of the child, the mother should wear a double mask and face shield, wash her hands and sanitize her surroundings regularly. Mother's milk is important for the child's proper growth and development. The milk of an infected mother has antibodies against coronavirus. Adults are advised to follow COVID-appropriate behavior to keep them protected from catching COVID-19 infection. How can we protect the children? Well, older kids can follow COVID-appropriate behavior to protect themselves. We do not recommend masks for children below 2 years. In fact, we have observed it is difficult to make children between 2 to 5 years wear masks. So, it is advisable to keep them indoors. But don't forget to engage them in play and physical activities, as the first 5 years are crucial for a child's mental and physical development. Every family member who is above 18 years of age should get vaccinated. If adults are protected, our children will also remain protected. Vaccines have been found safe for lactating mothers. So, they too should take the vaccine. Modi responsible for second wave of COVID-19, says Rahul. Mortality figures put out by Centre are big lies, he alleges. Special correspondent, New Delhi. Congress President Rahul Gandhi on Friday accused Prime Minister Narendra Modi of being responsible for the second wave of COVID-19, and warned of multiple such waves if the union government didn't evolve an effective vaccination policy. Mr. Gandhi, who was addressing a virtual press conference, alleged that the COVID-19 mortality figures put out by the centre were big lies. Though Mr. Modi was worried about his image, it is gone, it's dead. In the war against the pandemic, the country needed a strategy, and vaccination was the only permanent solution. Lockdown was a temporary solution, but it brought pain and benefits in equal measure, he said. The Prime Minister and his government have not yet understood that corona isn't just a disease but an evolving disease that gets more dangerous if it is given time and space to spread, he stated. Mr. Gandhi also accused the government of shutting down the feedback and information system. The pressure against social media companies such as Twitter and Facebook should be viewed in that context, he observed. Mr. Modi is responsible for the second wave of COVID-19, it's a result of his notanki, theatrics, and lack of his responsibility. It's time for him to be a leader, display leadership skills and show courage, and not come out with excuses and blame others, he said. The problem is there is no strategy. The Prime Minister doesn't think strategically. He is an event manager. He thinks one event at a time. You don't need events now, as events will kill people. You need a strategy. The aim of the strategy should be to shut the space for corona, he noted. With only 3% of India's population fully vaccinated and 97% potentially exposed to the virus, the situation was alarming not just to the country but a liability to the entire planet, Mr. Gandhi said. As the virus mutated very fast, there could come a time when even vaccines may not be as effective as they were now. If 50 to 60% India's population was vaccinated, then the threat of a third wave would greatly subside and there certainly won't be a fourth or fifth wave, he said. Children under midday meal scheme to get Rs.00 per child is too little, say activists. Special correspondent, New Delhi. The centre has decided to give about 100 rupees each to children studying in class 1 to class 8 in government schools, who are beneficiaries of the midday meal scheme. However, right to food activists say this is insufficient to provide the nutrition security envisaged by this measure. The money, Rs.200 crore in total, will be given to 11.8 crore children through direct benefit transfer as a one-time payment, according to an Education Ministry statement on Friday. The money comes from the cooking cost component of the scheme. This decision will help safeguard the nutritional levels of children and aid in protecting their immunity during the challenging pandemic times, said the statement. The central government will provide additional funds of about Rs.200 crore to states and union territories. Funds allocation. The central allocation for the midday meal scheme in 2021-22 is 11,500 rupees crore. Its largest component is cooking costs, which cover the prices of ingredients such as pulses, vegetables, cooking oil, salt, and condiments. Last year, the minimum allocation for cooking cost per child per day was set at 4 rupees and 97 paise for classes 1 to 5, and 7 rupees and 45 paise for classes 6 to 8, with the centre paying 60% of the cost. Children are being given cash in lieu of the midday meal in some places and dry rations in others. Either way, the quantities amounts are too low to be even adequate for one nutritious meal a day, said Dipa Sinha, Associate Professor of Economics at Ambedkar University, noting that 100 rupees per child amounts to less than 4 rupees a day even if it was a monthly payment. She suggested enhanced take-home rations, including eggs, vegetables, fruits, dal chana, all be given in order to ensure nutrition security. Ritika Khera, a development economist at IIT Delhi and a right-to-food activist, said, with approximately 200 school days, each child should be getting something like Rs.900 Rs.300 annually, as cooking cost component. All of last year, hardly any state did both, provide free grain and transfer these cooking costs. The government should transfer last year's arrears also, she said. She pointed out that when a school gets the per-child allowance for cooking costs, they are able to pool the money to purchase ingredients at wholesale prices. When this same amount is used to buy small quantities, for each child, parents will be able to purchase even less, she said. Centre tells West Bengal Chief Secretary to report to Delhi. Decision comes after CM skips meeting with PM on cyclone. Alapan Bandyopadhyay. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. Just as after West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee skipped a review meeting on cyclone Yas with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Appointments Committee of the Union Cabinet attached the state's Chief Secretary to the centre. The committee is headed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In an unprecedented order on Friday evening, the Department of Personnel and Training, DPT, invoked Rule 6(I) of the Indian Administrative Service, Cadre, Rules, 1954 to place the services of West Bengal Chief Secretary Alapan Bandyopadhyay with the Government of India. Rule 6(I) states that, provided that in case of any disagreement, the matter shall be decided by the central government and the state government shall give effect to the decision of the central government. The order asked the state government to relieve the officer with immediate effect, and directed him to report to DPT office at North Block in Delhi by 10 am on May 31st. Due to retire. Mr. Bandyopadhyay, who was to retire on May 31st, was given 3-month extension by the state government. Earlier in December 2020, the Home Ministry had attached 3 Indian Police Service (IPS) officers of West Bengal cadre, but the state government did not relieve them. Special GST meet on States Compensation Council rejects calls for tax waiver on vaccines. Exempted. The Finance Minister said amphotericin B has also been included in the list for tax-free imports. File photo. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. A special session of the Council will be held to discuss with the states how long the compensation cess levied under the GST regime needs to be extended beyond its current sunset date of July 2022, Ms. Sitharaman said. For this year's estimated shortfall in compensation cess collections to meet states' dues, the centre will raise 1 rupee and 58 paise lakh crore to recompense states via back-to-back loans, like it was done last year. The same formula adapted last year will be used this year. A rough estimate is that the centre will have to borrow 1 rupee and 58 paise lakh crore and lend it to states on a back-to-back basis. Though the Council did not agree to the demand from opposition states for a waiver on GST for COVID vaccines and other supplies to tackle the pandemic, it did agree to extend the GST exemption granted on relief material received free from abroad for donations to state-approved entities, to those who want to make such donations by purchasing the material from overseas. The period for availing this exemption has also been extended to August 31st. With the rising cases of black fungus, a particular medicine required for it, amphotericin B, has also been included in the exemption list for tax-free imports, Ms. Sitharaman said. On the Delhi High Court setting aside the 12% GST levy on imports of oxygen concentrators for personal use, Revenue Secretary Tarun Bajaj said the order has led to a situation where GST levies will be zero if the item is received as a gift, but 28% if purchased from abroad. The HC has ordered that if it is received as a gift, there will be no tax. While the notification has been set aside that was issued by us, which has resulted that if you buy from outside and bring it yourself, you are taxed at 28%, which had actually been brought down to 12%. So inadvertently, what has happened is that because of this confusion, that tax has become 28%. But that will be taken care of by the GOM, he said. Industry was broadly disappointed with the outcomes. There were no major announcements, and the issue of GST reduction on COVID items has been deferred by a few more days, which is disappointing. The Council has failed to address major pain points of the industry and the common man resulting from the pandemic, said Rajat Bose, partner, Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas & Co. Thank you. International news. Jaishankar meets US NSA. Private sector. Both sides hold discussions on global and regional issues. Welcome cooperation in fighting COVID-19. Stepping up ties. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar during a meeting with USTR Catherine K. in Washington. PTI. Sriram Lakshman, Washington. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar arrived in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday for 2 apparently hectic days which were packed with meetings with officials, including National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, Catherine K., lawmakers, and the private sector. Earlier in the week, speaking from New York City, the minister characterized the India-US relationship as one of the major relationships in the world. Mr. Jaishankar, who is on his first visit to the US during the Biden administration, met with Mr. Sullivan on Thursday. Both sides indicated that there was a discussion on regional, Indo-Pacific, or global issues, with Mr. Jaishankar specifying, via a tweet, that Afghanistan came up. Conveyed appreciation for US solidarity in addressing the COVID challenge. India's vaccine partnership can make a real difference, the tweet said. The US readout said Mr. Jaishankar and Mr. Sullivan welcomed cooperation that has resulted in the delivery of over $500 million in relief materials, state, federal and private sector sources, from the US to India. They agreed that people-to-people ties and shared values are the foundation of the US-India strategic partnership that is helping to end the pandemic, supporting a free and open Indo-Pacific, and providing global leadership on climate change, it said. The Hindu had reported that procuring vaccines and sorting out issues around this, such as early emergency use authorization and liability, are central to Mr. Jaishankar's trip, though officials have been keen to stress that this is not the focus of the visit and that discussions would cover a more comprehensive list of topics pertinent to the strategic ties between the two countries. Economic recovery. Mr. Jaishankar said he had good discussions with Ms. K, who recently announced that the Biden administration would support an India-South Africa initiative at the World Trade Organization, WTO, to waive intellectual property protections for COVID-19 vaccines. Our trade, technology and business cooperation are at the core of our strategic partnership. Enhancing them is vital to post-COVID economic recovery. Welcomed her positive stance on IPR issues and support for efficient and robust supply chains, Mr. Jaishankar said on Twitter. Mr. Jaishankar had breakfast and lunch meetings on Thursday organized by advocacy and industry groups, the US-India Business Council, USIBC, and the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, USISF. The USIBC meeting included a discussion on how the private sector, working via a consortium of 40 companies called the Global Task Force for Pandemic Response, could support India's health infrastructure and further ways to continue relief efforts, said the group. Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, both companies that manufacture COVID-19 vaccines of interest to India, are part of the task force. The consortium's ongoing efforts include the deployment of 1,000 ventilators and 1 lakh oxygen concentrators to India, 35,000 of which are scheduled for delivery by June end, the group said. Representatives of pharmaceutical firm Abbott and courier and shipping firm FedEx were among the companies present at the OSISP meeting, industry sources told The Hindu. Mr. Jaishankar also spoke on the phone with the Democratic chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Gregory Meeks, and its ranking member, Republican, Michael McCaul. He also had a phone call with House India co-chairs Steve Chabot, Republican. Brad Sherman, the other co-chair, was among those present at a dinner for Mr. Jaishankar on Wednesday, at the house of Indian Ambassador Taranjit Singh Sandhu. Others present there, according to US official sources, included Senators Tim Kaine, Michael Bennet. Also present was John Ossoff, the new senator from Georgia, a battleground state where the Indian-American vote is potentially crucial. On Friday, the minister is scheduled to meet with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Mr. Jaishankar met with officials again on Thursday evening. These included Director of National Intelligence Avril Haze and officials from the Departments of State, Energy, Treasury, Commerce, Homeland Security, and the National Science Foundation, according to announcements made by Mr. Sandhu and Mr. Jaishankar on Twitter. As India watches keenly, Sri Lanka seeks FDI in port city Colombo describes it as a fully Sri Lankan project. Meera Srinivasan Suhasini Haidar, Colombo, New Delhi. Sri Lanka on Friday invited international investment into the Colombo port city that it described as a fully Sri Lankan project, while official sources in New Delhi said they were keeping a close eye on the project and its security implications. If it is only a commercial venture, then that is there, Sri Lanka's choice. We will continue to engage Sri Lanka, while watching our national interest, said a government source in New Delhi, awaiting the final version of the bill whose blueprint the Sri Lankan Parliament's speaker signed on Thursday. The Colombo Port City Economic Commission Act is yet to be made public. Addressing concerns around the recently passed legislation on laws governing the Colombo Port City, which critics fear might be a Chinese enclave in the Sri Lankan capital, a team of government ministers said the China-backed $1.4 billion port city, pitted as a financial hub, had the potential to create 83,000 jobs and bring in up to $15 billion in investments. Constitutional experts and opposition legislators argue that the 269-acre financial hub, coming up on reclaimed land adjoining Colombo's seafront, would enjoy, besides a tax-free status, immunity from Sri Lankan law. Sections within Sri Lanka, including from the political opposition, trade unions and the influential Buddhist clergy, see it as a threat to Sri Lanka's sovereignty. Transparent venture. Seeking to allay prevalent fears about the project, In a meeting titled, "The Colombo Port City, Angel or Devil," Senior Minister G.L. Paris termed the venture transparent, and said, "There is no exclusivity in Sri Lanka's relationship with any one country." Colombo, he said, would pursue a non-aligned foreign policy amid growing public criticism over the government's China-centric policies. New Delhi too will go by benchmarks, the government source said, pointing to transparency, openness, and financial responsibility. No offshore havens, the port city, should respect the territorial integrity of Sri Lanka and respect international norms, the source said, requesting not to be named. Apart from the high geopolitical stakes in the big-ticket investment project in the strategically located island nation, the Colombo port city has sparked a raging debate within the country over its China policy. Instances of official signage excluding Tamil, an official language, while including Mandarin, drew wide criticism from the public. China has been among the top lenders to Sri Lanka, especially since the pandemic struck, offering a $1 billion in loan and a nearly $1.5 billion currency swap facility. Earlier this week, Sri Lanka's cabinet awarded a project to build an elevated highway in the capital's suburbs, estimated cost $1 billion, to the state-owned China Harbour Engineering Corporation, CHEC, on a build-operate-transfer basis, for 15 years. Man attacks 3 French police officers, shot dead assailant was on terrorist watch list. Reuters Paris. A known radical, suspected of carrying out a knife attack in France died from injuries sustained in a shootout with police on Friday, hours after he badly wounded a female officer in the latest violence directed at police in recent months. The man, who was on a terrorist watch list according to the Interior Ministry, had been on the run after the attack in La Chapelle-sur-Ardres near the western city of Nantes. 80 officers were dispatched to pursue him and 2 gendarmes were wounded during an exchange of fire. No motive for the stabbing has emerged, but the attacker was a known radical and suffering from a very serious psychiatric illness. Amid showdown with EU, Lukashenko seeks Russia's help. Belarusian president is scheduled to meet Putin in Sochi. Associated Press Moscow. Belarus authoritarian leader will discuss closer economic ties with Russia on Friday, as he seeks support from his main backer amid a bruising showdown with the EU over the forced diversion of a passenger jet to arrest a dissident journalist. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has found himself increasingly isolated after 26-year-old journalist Roman Protasiewicz was arrested after his flight was forced to land in Minsk. EU leaders denounced it as a hijacking and piracy and responded by barring Belarusian carriers from the bloc's airspace and airports and advising European airlines to skirt Belarus. The bloc's foreign ministers sketched out tougher sanctions on Thursday to target the country's lucrative potash industry and other sectors. Mr. Lukashenko and President Vladimir Putin are set to meet on Friday in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. Germany apologizes for genocide in Namibia. Herero Paramount chief slams deal. Reuters Berlin. Germany apologized on Friday for its role in the slaughter of Herero and Nama Tribes people in Namibia more than a century ago and officially described the massacre as genocide for the first time, as it agreed to fund projects in the region. Namibia's President Hage Geingob welcomed the historic move, but Herero Paramount chief Wekai Rukoro dismissed a deal agreed by the two governments as an insult, because it did not include payment of reparations. Instead, Germany will fund $1.3 billion of reconstruction and development projects in Namibia, which German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said would directly benefit the genocide-affected communities. France and the Rwandan genocide in Kigali. President Emmanuel Macron asked Rwandans for forgiveness. Grim reminder, the skulls and bones of people slaughtered at a church where they sought refuge at an ossuary. AP file Ben Kurtis. Stanley Johnny. French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday asked for forgiveness for his country's role in the 1994 Rwandan massacre in which about 8 lakhs people, mostly ethnic Tutsis, were killed. Speaking at the genocide memorial in Kigali, Rwanda's capital, Mr. Macron said France chose silence over examination of the truth for too long, but stopped short of issuing an apology. Close ties. France, which enjoyed close ties with Rwanda's Hutu-led government of President Juvenal Habyarimana, has long been criticized for its role in the killings of the Tutsi minorities in the months of April to June 1994. In May 2019, President Macron, promising a new beginning with Rwanda, set up a 15-member expert committee to investigate his country's role in the genocide. The committee, which had access to official files and secret documents, submitted its findings to the government in March, which stated that France, which was then ruled by President Francois Mitterrand, bore heavy and overwhelming responsibilities for being blind to the events that led to the killings. The report blamed Mitterrand for a failure of policy towards Rwanda in 1994. Rwanda had commissioned a separate inquiry, which concluded in a report submitted to the cabinet in April that France enabled the genocide. Hutu-Tutsi relations. The majority Hutus and minority Tutsis have had a troubled relationship in Rwanda that goes back to the German and Belgian colonial period. Colonialists ruled Rwanda through the Tutsi monarchy. Tutsis were appointed as local administrative chiefs and the ethnic minority enjoyed relatively better educational and employment opportunities, which led to widespread resentment among the majority Hutus. In 1959, Rwanda saw violent riots led by Hutus in which some 20,000 Tutsis were killed and many more were displaced. Amid growing violence, the Belgian authorities handed over power to the Hutu elite. King Kigeli fled the country. In the 1960 elections, organized by the Belgians, Hutu parties gained control of nearly all local communes. In 1961, Hutu leader Gregoire Kayibanda declared Rwanda an autonomous republic, and the next year, the country became independent. Kayibanda became Rwanda's first elected president, while the Tutsis who fled the country formed armed insurgencies. Since then, Rwanda had been controlled by Hutus, until their genocidal regime was toppled by the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, in 1994. What led to the killings? The crisis escalated in the 1990s when the RPF, led by Paul Kagame, the current president, grew in strength and posed a serious challenge to the regime of President Habyarimana, who was backed by France and had defense ties with Israel. In 1993, Habyarimana, who rose to power in 1973, was forced to sign a peace agreement, Arusha Accords, with the RPF. This led to resentment among Hutu militias, backed by the government, towards local Tutsi population, who were accused of collaborators of the RPF. On 6 April 1994, a Falcon 50 jet carrying Habyarimana and his Burundi counterpart Cyprien Ntayamira was shot down near Kigali International Airport. The Hutu-led government blamed the RPF for the attack on the presidential jet. The military and Hutu militias, mainly Interahamwe, unleashed violence against Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Mr. Kagame has denied any involvement in shooting down the plane. The RPF says Hutu extremists ordered the attack to use it as an excuse for the genocide, which they were preparing for long before the plane downing, as well as to capture power. The killings were a pre-planned extermination campaign. The militias, with support from the government, launched a premeditated violent campaign on April 7, aimed at eliminating the entire Tutsi communities. Interahamwe militants went to cities and villages across the country, hunting down Tutsis, and asking Hutus to join the campaign, killing at a pace of 8,000 people a day. The Hutus who opposed the killings were also targeted. The militias used a radio station to coordinate the killings. Bodies were dumped in the Nyabarongo River. France, which had backed the Hutu government, did nothing to stop the massacre. Thousands were slaughtered in churches where they sought refuge. The Catholic Church had deep ties with the ruling Hutu elites. Archbishop Vincent Nsengiyumvan was a member of the ruling party's Central Committee. Many priests were involved in the killings. In a visit to Rwanda in 2017, Pope Francis asked for forgiveness for the Church's role in the killings. The violence continued for 3 months. How did it end? The killings came to an end after the RPF, under Mr. Kagame's command, captured Kigali and toppled the Hutu regime. While the RPF put an end to the Hutu campaign to exterminate Tutsis, The rebels were also accused of carrying out revenge killings during the civil war. When it was evident that the RPF was winning, an estimated 2 million Hutus fled Rwanda, mainly to the neighboring Zaire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Hutu militias are still operating from. The RPF initially went about establishing a multi-ethnic government with Pasteur Bizimungu, a Hutu, being the president. Mr. Kagame, a Tutsi, was his deputy. In 2000, Mr. Kagame assumed the presidency and continues to be in power till today. Assad re-elected with 95% of votes. Official. Bashar al-Assad. Agents France Presse Damascus. Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has been re-elected with 95.1% of the votes cast, the parliament speaker announced on Thursday. The two other presidential candidates, former Minister Abdullah Saloum Abdullah and Mahmoud Mehdi, a member of the so-called tolerated opposition, received 1.5% and 3.3% of the votes respectively, according to the official results of Wednesday's election. In a country ravaged by war since 2011, 14.2 million people went to the polls, a turnout rate of 76.64%, according to Parliament Speaker Hamoud Sabab. The election went ahead in the two-thirds of the country controlled by the government, and in some Syrian embassy overseas. It was the second presidential election in the country since the start of the war, which has cost over 388,000 lives. Mr. Assad has dismissed Western accusations that Wednesday's vote was neither free nor fair. Thank you. India's foreign policy, an overview, core objectives, fundamental principles and current priorities. By retired Achal Kumar Malhotra. Venue, Jayaprakash University, Chhapra, Bihar. Date, 18th December 2019. Honorable Vice Chancellor. Distinguished faculty members, dear students. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank the Vice Chancellor of the Jayaprakash University for his initiative to organize a talk on India's foreign policy. This should go a long way in generating interest in the less debated subject in our country. I would also like to thank Ministry of External Affairs for deputing me to deliver the talk under its prestigious Distinguished Lecture Series program. The mutually agreed topic assigned to me is India's foreign policy, an overview, core objectives, fundamental principles and current priorities. Accordingly, I have divided my talk into 3 segments. I will begin with the overarching objectives of India's foreign policy. I will then list out the fundamental principles which India follows in the implementation of its foreign policy and achievement of its core objectives. I will then talk about selected foreign policy priorities and challenges ahead of us. And finally, I would look forward to your questions and would be glad to respond. Foreign policy objectives. In my opinion, India's foreign policy has at least the following 4 core objectives. First objective. The first and overarching objective of India's foreign policy, like that of any other country, is to secure its national interests. The scope of national interests is fairly wide. In our case, it includes, for instance, securing our borders to protect territorial integrity, countering cross-border terrorism, energy security, food security, cyber security. In short, the first objective is to protect India from traditional and non-traditional threats. Second objective. The second objective is the objective to create an external environment which would be conducive for an inclusive domestic development. Let me elaborate. We need substantial external inputs in the form of foreign partners, foreign direct investments, transfer of modern technology so that we can develop a world-class infrastructure in India, so that our programs such as Make in India, Skills India, Digital India, Smart Cities, can succeed, so that we have advanced agriculture, and modern defense equipment, etc. India's foreign policy's added focus on this aspect in recent years has resulted in diplomacy for development by integrating economic diplomacy with political diplomacy. Third objective. In the past 72 years, India has evolved from a poor developing country to an emerging economy and is counted as an important global player. The third important objective therefore is to ensure that India's voice is heard on global forums and that India is able to influence world opinion on issues of global dimensions such as terrorism, climate change, disarmament, non-discriminatory global trade practices, reforms of institutions of global governance, which affect India as much as rest of the world. Fourth objective, India has 30 million strong diaspora comprised of non-resident Indians and persons of Indian origin, spread all over the world. Over the years it has emerged as an influential force in the host countries. It provides a strong link between India and other countries and can play an important role in strengthening bilateral relations. The fourth and an important objective is to engage Indian diaspora and derive maximum benefits from their presence abroad, while at the same time protecting their interests to the extent possible. Dynamic world, proactive and pragmatic approach. We are living in a dynamic world. India's foreign policy is therefore geared up to be proactive, flexible as well as pragmatic so as to make quick adjustments to respond to evolving situations. In the implementation of its foreign policy, India, however, invariably adheres to a set of basic principles on which no compromise is made. Foreign policy, fundamental principles. These fundamental principles include 1. Panchashil, or 5 virtues, which were first formally enunciated in the Agreement on Trade between the Tibet region of China and India signed on 29 April 1954 and later evolved to act as the basis of conduct of international relations globally. These 5 principles are: mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, 2. Mutual non-aggression, 3. Mutual non-interference, 4. Equality and mutual benefit, and we peaceful coexistence. 2. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. Related to this is the concept of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. In other words, the entire world community is a part of one single large global family and the members of the family must live together in peace and harmony, work and grow together and have trust in each other for mutual benefits. 3. India is opposed to export of ideologies and change of regimes. India believes in and supports democracy. However, India does not believe in the export of ideologies. India has therefore endeavored to deal with the government of the day, be it a democracy, monarchy or military dictatorship. India believes that it is best left to the people of the country to choose or remove their leaders and retain or change the form of governance. By extension of the above principle, India does not endorse the idea of regime change or violation of territorial integrity in a particular country by use of force or other means by another country or a group of countries. X. US interventions in Iraq, Libya, Syria or Russia's intervention in Georgia, Ukraine, etc. At the same time, India does not hesitate in promoting democracy wherever potential exists. This is done by proactively providing assistance in capacity building and strengthening the institutions of democracy, albeit with the explicit consent of the concerned government. X. Afghanistan. 4. India does not endorse unilateral sanctions military actions. India does not endorse the idea of imposing sanctions military action against any individual country by another country or a group of countries unless these sanctions military actions have been approved by the United Nations as a result of international consensus. India therefore contributes only to such peacekeeping military operations which are part of the UN peacekeeping forces. India has contributed nearly 195,000 troops, the largest number from any country, participated in more than 49 missions and 168 Indian peacekeepers have made the supreme sacrifice while serving in UN missions. India has also provided and continues to provide eminent force commanders for UN missions. 5. Interference, no. Intervention, yes. India does not believe in interference in the internal affairs of other countries. However, if an act, innocent or deliberate, by any country has the potential of impinging upon India's national interests, India does not hesitate in quick and timely intervention. You will agree with me when I say that intervention is qualitatively different from interference, particularly when the intervention is made at the request of the country concerned. Examples: Bangladesh 1971, IPF in Sri Lanka, 1987-90, Maldives, 1988. 6. Constructive engagement over aggression. India advocates the policy of constructive engagement over aggression. It believes that violent retaliation and confrontation can only complicate the matters. War is no solution. After every war, the conflicting parties ultimately come to negotiating table, by which time much damage has already been done. This applies in particular to Pakistan, the origin of state-sponsored terrorism targeted at India. The policy of engagement is not allowed, however, to be misunderstood as India's weakness. Strong and loud messages and actions emanate from India each and every time our patience is tested. The surgical strike to target terrorist launch pads in Pakistan-occupied Indian territory in September 2016 is one such example. Airstrike at terrorist camps in Balkote in February 2019 in retaliation to Pulwama terrorist attack is yet another example. 7. Strategic autonomy. Partnerships yes, alliances no. Independence of decision-making and strategic autonomy are yet another significant features of India's foreign policy. India thus believes in partnerships and shuns alliances, particularly military alliances. 8. Global consensus on issues of global dimensions. India advocates a global debate and global consensus on issues of global dimensions such as world trade regime, climate change, terrorism, intellectual property rights, global governance. India's foreign policy priorities. 1. From non-alignment to multi-engagement. For several years post-independence, India had followed the policy of non-alignment and led the non-aligned movement, NAM. However, in the backdrop of Cold War between the two superpowers, namely the USA and USSR, India was usually seen as more inclined towards the Soviet Union. The collapse of the USSR in 1991 created a large strategic space for India to maneuver. Currently, although India hasn't abandoned the basic tenets of non-alignment, India believes in the policy of multi-engagement. However, it doesn't believe in building relations with one at the cost of the other. 2. South Asia. India's neighborhood first policy. India is the largest country in South Asia both in terms of area and population. India's economy is sound and its growth rates are higher than those of others in the region. India's stature as an important player in international affairs is growing. India's credentials as a responsible nuclear state and its proven capabilities in space technology are acknowledged worldwide. These asymmetries have caused historically a sense of trust deficit in the region vis-à-vis India. Vested interests in neighboring countries have floated erroneous narratives such as India acts like a big bully or a big brother. In some countries there are segments of society which consider being anti-Indian as being equal to patriotism. India's neighborhood first policy, unveiled in May 2014, seeks to address the trust deficit, reset relations and build bridges of friendship and understanding through mutually beneficial cooperation. The outcome so far has been mixed. The engagement with neighbors is a continuous process and the level of relationship is often determined by the shifting priorities of the governments in our neighborhood. At the moment, India's relations with Bhutan are exemplary. We have close and cordial relations with Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Maldives. A new chapter in relations with Sri Lanka has begun with the election of a new government in that country. Relations with Nepal are more or less on an even keel. Relations with Pakistan have touched the lowest ebb in recent history. South Asia, SAARC and BIMSTEC. India remains committed to integration of South Asia through South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, processes. However, SAARC as an organization has not lived up to expectations when measured in terms of delivery. It has been in existence for several decades and yet South Asia remains the least integrated region in the world. To make it worse, the poor state of India-Pakistan relations and Pakistan's policy of obstruction has had an adverse impact on the progress in SAARC. No SAARC summit at the level of heads of government, heads of state has been held since the 18th summit in November 2014 in Kathmandu. The 19th summit was scheduled to be held in Islamabad in 2016, which India decided to boycott in view of continued state patronage and sponsorship of cross-border terrorism by Pakistan. India was supported in its decision by Bangladesh, Bhutan and Nepal. In the backdrop of more or less dormant SAARC, India has adopted a two-pronged approach. First, it is willing to undertake sub-regional projects with as many members as are agreeable. As a result, India, Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh went ahead and signed the landmark Motor Vehicles Agreement for seamless movement of road traffic among 4 SAARC countries in June 2015, leaving aside unwilling Pakistan and others. Later in May 2017, India launched the South Asia Satellite, a communication satellite built by ISRO to provide a variety of communication services over the South Asian region. The satellite was launched despite reservations by Pakistan. While remaining committed to SAARC, India has begun to see beyond SAARC. It is focusing on BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectorial Technical and Economic Cooperation, as a platform for inter-regional cooperation between 5 SAARC countries, India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal and Sri Lanka, and 2 Southeast countries, Myanmar and Thailand. India deliberately chose BIMSTEC over SAARC for outreach meetings with BRICS at the BRICS Goa summit in November 2016. India's policy is not to replace SAARC by BIMSTEC. Both are relevant and can complement and supplement each other. 3. India's extended neighborhood, Southeast Asia, ASEAN and East Asia. In the context of India's extended neighborhood, the 10 ASEAN countries in the Southeast Asia are of utmost importance. India's first outreach towards the Asian tigers was made in early 1990s in the backdrop of the demise of the USSR, end of Cold War and our own decision to liberalize economy and integrate it with world economy. As a result, India's Look East policy was announced. The LEP has gone through 3 phases. The first phase of India's Look East policy, 1992 to 2002, was ASEAN-centered and focused primarily on trade and investment linkages. During this period, India entered into a sectoral dialogue partnership with ASEAN in 1992, which was upgraded to full dialogue partner status in 1996, when India also joined the ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF. From 2002, India began holding annual India-ASEAN summit-level meetings. The Phase 2 began in 2003 when the then Foreign Minister S.H. Yashwant Sinha, at Harvard University, 29 September 2003, shared the government's expanded definition of East, covering Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan and South Korea, with ASEAN at its core. He further added that the new phase also marked a shift from trade to wider economic and security issues, including joint efforts to protect the sea lanes and coordinate counter-terrorism activities. In 2012, the 20 years of dialogue partnership culminated into strategic partnership. In 2014, the new government led by PM Modi renamed the Look East Policy, LEP, as Act East Policy, AP. This was more than rebranding. Since then, the government has sought a more dynamic and action-oriented approach in relations with ASEAN. Considerable attention is being made to promote India's economic links with CMLV countries, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos and Vietnam, a sub-region within ASEAN whose relative proximity with India's northeast has inherent advantage. As one of its most significant initiatives, the Indian government set up the Project Development Fund in 2016 within the Export and Import Bank of India with a corpus of 500 rupees crore, approx. $71.5 million, to promote Indian investments in the region. The most significant exposition of India's Act East policy was the presence of heads of state and heads of government at the 2018 Republic Day celebrations. India is now expected not only to bolster its economic and strategic engagements with the region but also to emerge as a potential security balancer in the region as well. The India-USA-Japan-Australia Quad is a pointer in that direction. Our recent decision to stay out of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, was guided by our national interests. For connectivity, India places a great emphasis on physical and digital connectivity to integrate South Asia and to connect South Asia with other regions, particularly Southeast Asia and Central Asia. Within South Asia, the Bangladesh-Bhutan-India-Nepal (BBIN) Motor Vehicle Agreement provides seamless connectivity for movement of passenger and cargo vehicles within the 4 countries. Some of the projects which are of utmost importance include the development of strategically important Chabahar port, which connects India on the one hand with Iran and Afghanistan and on the other with Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan, the common adversary of Afghanistan and India. Even though India had started talking to Iran in this context in 2003, the real push from India was given in mid-2014, resulting in the signing of agreements and actual development and inauguration of the first phase of the port in December 2017. India has since taken over the physical possession, and this is the first port India is operating outside India. Afghanistan sent its first cargo to India using Jaranj-Chabahar route in February 2019. India had earlier sent wheat to Afghanistan in 2017 using this sea route. India has established 2 direct air freight corridors as reliable alternative supply routes for landlocked Afghanistan. The Delhi-Kabul corridor has been operational since June 2017, and Delhi Great Corridor was inaugurated in March 2019. The 1,360 kilometers trilateral India, Myanmar-Thailand highway under construction and likely to become operational by next year will connect India's northeast with ASEAN. India is funding the construction of the segments in Myanmar. India has also proposed to link off with Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam. Kaldan Multimodal Transport Project is yet another project which was moving at a slow pace and was expedited in 2015 by allocation of substantial funds. The project seeks to connect India's landlocked northeast with mainland India through Myanmar using maritime, inland water and road systems. KMMT project, when completed, will cut short the time for transportation of goods from Kolkata to Mizoram by up to 4 days and cut short the distance by approx. 950 kilometers. 5 issues of global dimensions: terrorism, corruption, black money, money laundering, fugitive economic offenders. Global campaign against international terrorism remains high on the agenda of the Indian government. Realizing that the negotiations on the draft Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, CICIT, are moving at snail's pace, India has plans to build a Committee of Nations Against International Terrorism as a voluntary multilateral forum based on the principles of CICIT to combat international terrorism. In an implied reference to Pakistan, the BJP Manifesto 2019 declared India's commitment to take all possible steps at international forums to isolate such countries and organizations which support terrorism. India is likely to continue to lobby so that Pakistan was moved from the grey to black list of Financial Action Task Force, FATA. China's defense of Pakistan on terrorism-related issues and some countries' selective approach towards terrorism is a challenge India will have to reckon with. India also remains focused on raising at global forums such issues as corruption, black money, money laundering, fugitive economic offenders. Expeditious extradition of economic offenders such as Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, etc. would be another priority. Climate change. India is committed to making its own contribution towards lowering greenhouse gas emissions and expects at the same time the developed countries to play an important role both in reducing emissions and assisting developing countries through funds and technology to combat climate change, in view of the historical responsibility of the developed world for causing damage to environment through indiscreet industrial development in 19th and 20th centuries. Disarmament. India remains committed to non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. India's record as a nuclear power is impeccable. India stands for global, non-discriminatory and verifiable disarmament. Reforms in institutions of global governance. India is of the opinion that the institutions of global governance such as UN, World Bank, IMF etc. do not represent the ground realities of contemporary world, which have undergone tremendous change since those institutions were created decades ago after the World War II, and therefore need to be reformed. India's bilateral relations with selected countries. Pakistan and China. Within our immediate neighborhood, I now propose to discuss our relations with Pakistan and China. Pakistan. In 2014, India's relations with Pakistan were at low ebb. In sync with its neighborhood first policy, India made considerable efforts to normalize its strained relations with Pakistan. By the beginning of 2016, it was abundantly clear that the Pakistani deep state, army and ISI, was not interested in the resumption of dialogue and continued to promote and support cross-border terrorism to harm India. Limits were crossed when the Pathankot airbase was attacked within a week of PM Modi's gesture of making an unscheduled halt at Lahore, en route New Delhi from Kabul, in December 2015. There was a further setback to relations when 18 soldiers of Indian Army were killed in a terrorist attack in September 2016 in Uri. The Baramulla district of J&K. India had reasons to lose patience and change the rules of engagement along the line of control. It carried out a successful surgical strike on terrorist camps in the Pak-occupied Kashmir across the line of control within a week of Uri attack. Similarly, the Pulwama attack killing 40 CRPF Jawans in February 2019 was promptly retaliated by an airstrike by the Indian Air Force on the terrorist training center in Balkot, inside the Pakistani territory. Relations have gone from bad to worse due to Pakistan's feverish attempts to internationalize Kashmir issue after the abrogation of Article 370. These efforts were skillfully thwarted by India's proactive diplomatic offensive. India has adopted a firm policy of terror and talks cannot go together, and has made it abundantly clear that no departure will be made unless there are tangible and verifiable concrete evidence of Pakistan reigning in the state-sponsored and supported terrorism targeted against India, and stopping interference in Kashmir. China. During the visit of the Chinese President Xi Jinping to India in September 2014, India extended its hand of friendship and conveyed a clear message that the two countries must work together so that the 21st century could belong to Asia. The trajectory of India-China relations, however, did not develop the way India would have liked. India does not endorse China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, particularly the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which passes through the Pak-occupied Kashmir and thus raises the issue of sovereignty. China is also blocking India's membership of Nuclear Suppliers Group, NSG, and protects Pakistan on the issue of terrorism by projecting it as a victim of terrorism and advocating that no country should be singled out while addressing the issues related to terrorism. China on its part is apprehensive about India joining hands with USA, Japan and Australia to forge an anti-China alliance to counter it in Indo-Pacific region. There are issues arising out of huge balance of trade in China's favor, and also unresolved border disputes. The prolonged Doklam face-off between the Indian and Chinese troops in September 2017 posed a serious threat to bilateral relations but was fortunately resolved thanks to skillful use of diplomacy. The understanding which emerged from the informal summit between PM Modi and President-elect Xi Jinping in China in April 2018 has come to be known as Wuhan Spirit, the essence of which is that the two sides must enhance efforts to build upon the convergences and handle the differences through peaceful discussions, and that peaceful, stable and balanced relations between India and China will be a positive factor for stability amidst current global uncertainties, and further that proper management of the bilateral relationship will be conducive for the development and prosperity of the region, and will create the conditions for the Asian century. The Wuhan spirit was carried further through second informal summit in October 2019 between PM Modi and President Xi Jinping, described popularly as Chennai Connect. The issues which divide India and China are unlikely to be resolved in near future. Meanwhile, India is expected to cooperate and collaborate with China whenever feasible, e.g. trade and investments, confront whenever required, e.g. Doklam, and compete with and contain China whenever the occasion demands, e.g. counter China's influence in our neighborhood. Two big powers, USA and Russia. On the whole, the trajectory of relations with USA has been on the ascendancy, except that some irritants have appeared in bilateral relations in the recent past. The US has accorded the status of defense partner, which puts India at par with NATO allies. The USA is keen that India acts as a counterweight to China in Asia. The USA would also like India to join hands with USA, Japan, Australia and others in the region to act as net security providers in Indo-Pacific Ocean in matters such as maritime security, freedom of navigation, piracy and disaster management. The unstated objective is to contain China's expansionist designs, particularly in South China Sea, where China is undertaking construction activities on disputed islands. The US sanctions on Russia, CAATSA, countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act, and also on Iran have implications for India's defense procurements, S-400 missile defense system from Russia, and for its energy security due to inability to buy oil from Iran. In addition, the USA has withdrawn GSP under which India's exports to USA worth $5.6 billion were receiving preferential tariffs. India has retaliated by imposing higher duties on certain US exports to India. These concerns were addressed during the visit of the US Secretary of State to New Delhi and PM Modi's meeting with President Trump on the sidelines of G20 summit in June this year. India was candid and firm in conveying that ultimately India will do whatever it considers best in country's national interests. The Soviet Union and its successor state Russian Federation are rightly described as India's reliable, tried and tested friends. For a fairly long period of time, Russia was the leading source of defense procurements for India. Even now we heavily depend on Russia for new, modern defense equipment and spares of equipment bought earlier. On assumption of charge in 2014, the new government had moved swiftly and aggressively to diversify India's defense requirements. Our move came at a time when Russia's economy was going through a difficult phase due to US and European sanctions and dip in oil prices. Our genuine desire to diversify sources of defense supplies was misunderstood by Russia as India's drift away from Russia. India was quick in rectifying the situation and restoring mutual trust and confidence. Our relations with Russia are now on firm footing and the focus of special and privileged strategic partnership is on defense, energy, space and trade and investments. Foreign policy challenges. Balancing act, to steer clear of the ongoing conflicts. Challenges are numerous. Stable relations with countries in the neighborhood and leading powers such as Russia, USA, China, developed countries such as Japan, France, UK and Germany, and resource-rich countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Israel are in India's interests, particularly in the context of sourcing raw materials, modern technology, investments, sophisticated weapons, joint ventures to meet the requirements of inclusive domestic development and success of programs such as Make in India, Smart Cities, Skill India, and for the modernization of infrastructure. The challenge is to steer clear of the ongoing conflicts, for instance between the USA and Russia and Iran and USA, the China's trade war resulting in particular in a sanctions regime, like CAATSA, which, as mentioned earlier, is to the disadvantage of India. India's global aspirations. India is a politically stable country and its economy is steady. India is building up its military muscles slowly but steadily. As a large market, India is an attractive destination for foreign investments, joint ventures, commodity exports. India's stature in international affairs has grown considerably in recent years. Arguably, India's time has come. A certain degree of assertiveness in foreign affairs was visible even during the past 5 years, when India appeared to punch according to its weight. I would like to conclude on the following note. India is now bound to ensure that it plays an increasingly important role in shaping the global agenda, that it is part of the rule-making, rather than rule-following, and that it emerges as a strong pole in the multipolar world. Needless to add that India deserves a permanent seat in the UN General Assembly as and when it is reformed and expanded, and in this context a large number of countries have already committed their support. I thank you all for your attention and patience. I would also like to thank Vice Chancellor's team, in particular Assistant Professor Dr. Sonali Singh for her initiative and efforts in enthusiastically organizing this event, and Professor R. Singh for ensuring that my stay here in Chhapra is comfortable. Thank you. Business News. COVID toll on economy deepens. Poll respondents in Reuters survey say jobs crisis may worsen, on average see full-year growth at 9.8%. Jabki, until a large share of the population is vaccinated, a risk of new waves and lockdowns remains. S.R. Raghunathan S.R. Reuters Bangalore. India's economic outlook has weakened again, albeit slightly, with worst-case scenario forecasts suggesting the toll from the COVID-19 pandemic could be much deeper, stoking fears the job crisis may worsen over the coming year, a Reuters poll found. Renewed restrictions to curb the current wave have stalled economic activity, leaving many millions out of work and pushing economists, who have broadly been bullish, to downgrade their views for the second time since early April. The May 20th to 27th poll showed the outlook for the current quarter was lowered to 21.6% annually, and to 9.8% on average for this fiscal year, down from 23% and 10.4% respectively a month ago. The economy was then forecast to grow 6.7% next fiscal year, compared to 6.5% predicted previously. While the consensus pointed to healthy growth figures later this year, all 29 economists, in response to an additional question, warned the outlook was either weak and prone to further downgrades, or fragile, with a limited downside. Recovery in India was strong in the months before the second wave, said Wouter van Eikelenberg, an economist at Rabobank. This leads us to believe the recovery can rebound quickly after the number of new infections have come down. But vaccination implementation needs to pick up pace in order to have an effect. Sword of Damocles. Therefore, new surges of the virus hang above recovery like the sword of Damocles. Until a large share of the population is vaccinated, there remains this downside risk of new waves and subsequent lockdowns hampering the recovery, he added. Underscoring concerns that a slow vaccine rollout may make a bigger dent in the economy, the consensus showed in a worst-case scenario the economy would average just 6.8% growth this fiscal year after its deepest ever recession last year. Let's hope the situation doesn't go there, said Gareth Leather, senior Asia economist at Capital Economics. If it does and we do have another wave, after this one, maybe the government will learn some lessons, that it is better to lock down the economy sooner, rather than later. The threat of further waves will hang over the economic outlook so long as India's vaccination progress remains lackluster, he added. There is going to be a significant demand shock to the economy, some of that could be permanent demand destruction, thereby pushing more out of the jobs market and keeping the unemployment rate elevated over the coming year, said Prakash Satpal, senior Asia economist at ING. India added 16.9 lakh fewer jobs in FY21. Press Trust of India Mumbai. Net job creation in the economy fell by 16.9 lakh in flow Y21 over the previous fiscal, shows an SBI research analysis of EPFO payroll data. However, the flow Y21 numbers are better than the flow Y20 net job creation, which had declined by 28.9 lakh, further cementing the view that the economy is not creating new employment opportunities. The latest EPFO data shows net new EPF subscribers stood at 94.5 lakh in flow Y21 and NPS added 5.82 lakh, taking the cumulative net addition to 100.4 lakh, which is marginally down from 102.3 lakh in flow Y20. GST on vaccines, cylinders not justified, states. Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The imposition of 5% GST on vaccines and 12% GST on oxygen cylinders, medicines and other material required for treatment of infection is unjustified, said Shanti Dhariwal, Urban Development and Housing Minister, representing Rajasthan at the GST Council meeting. Delhi Finance Minister Manish Sisodia said Punjab, West Bengal, Kerala and many other states echoed his proposal to make essential COVID-19 supplies tax-free, but finance ministers of several BJP-ruled states strongly opposed it. Odisha Finance Minister Niranjan Pujari demanded reduction in tax rates on items such as vaccines. He cited twin challenges the state was currently battling, the pandemic and the aftermath of Cyclone Yas. Batting for small states, Arunachal Pradesh Deputy CM Chowna May requested that they be allowed to levy COVID cess to tide over financial difficulties. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video. As